Coming up ahead in this episode of Xtalks Spotlight.
What you want to try to avoid if you're a service provider is to have your sponsor think that your operations team and quality teams never talk to each other. And likewise, it's not helpful for a service provider to have the opinion that the same is true in the sponsor, quality and operations. Building the strong relationships between quality and operations to enable those interactions I talked about with the project managers, it really needs to come from the top of each organization.
Hello, and welcome to Xtalks Spotlight, illuminating insights from subject matter experts and industry thought leaders. I'm Sonia Hunt. In this episode, we're asking the question, how can quality and operations teams work collaboratively to drive value for clinical trial sponsors?
Discover the powerful impact that quality operations partnerships can have on clinical trial sponsors. In this Xtalks Spotlight edition, I sat down with Allison O'Neill, Chief Operating Officer at Y-Prime. Allison shared how a collaborative approach between technology providers and sponsors, centered on open communication, trust, and a shared commitment to excellence, can drive value for clinical trial sponsors. Learn how this partnership mindset helps sponsors achieve their clinical trial goals more efficiently and effectively, ensuring data quality while improving the clinical trial experience. Thank you for taking the time in this Spotlight interview, Allison.
Well, thank you for hosting me and thank you for giving me the forum. I appreciate it.
So to start us off, how can a strong partnership between a technology provider's quality and operations teams directly benefit clinical trial sponsors?
A strong partnership really starts from the very, very beginning. Let's talk about a technology provider being a vendor. So essentially, a vendor is approached by the sponsor about taking part in the study, providing their services. If all of the information that is available, everything that can help that vendor is made clear to them, then there are no surprises later in the process. So the sponsor is benefited by having a smooth delivery of the project, a smooth delivery of the service, without coming across items that maybe the vendor could have clarified earlier if they had been transparent with regards to items. Sometimes these things don't seem important to the sponsor. Sometimes there's information about a clinical trial, information about a protocol, information about a status with a regulatory review of a protocol, for instance, that may or may not be shared with the vendor. But sharing everything then makes it a much more, let's say, smooth activity for sponsors. It means everything is predictable. It means timings can be observed. Your data come when you're expecting your data. Your data are of a quality where you're expecting the quality to be from. Your sites and patients, at the end of the day, this is all about patients. Your sites and patients get the same experience that everybody is expecting in the beginning. So it's about the stronger the partnership, I would say, the smoother the delivery can be. The less the surprises are, the less often somebody has to run, whether it's within the provider or the sponsor, and bring in reinforcements, whether it's from management, whether it's from other parts of the organization, the project managers or other individuals who are coordinating the activities can pretty much run that smoothly without having to bring in extra resource or having to do any rework.
And for sponsors looking to foster a culture of collaboration with their technology partners, what practical steps would you recommend they take to build strong, effective relationships between quality and operations teams?
That's an interesting question. I'm going to break that into two parts. One is the steps between the sponsor and the service provider. And then you mentioned between quality and operations teams. And so there's multiple ways that works. You can have interaction between the sponsor and the providers teams, but then within the sponsor and within the service provider, it's important that there's a good relationship, a good level of collaboration. So let's talk about between the sponsor and the service provider initially. I already mentioned giving as much information as is available rather than giving as much information as you think is necessary. So that would be the first point. But then at the end of the day, these partnerships are about people. So don't forget the people part of the partnership. Often there'll be people from a procurement group who set up an initial relationship with a service provider. But please don't forget the project managers. The project managers are the people who interact on a regular basis. They are the people who make the partnerships work. So if there's any opportunity for face-to-face meetings, if there's only remote meetings, let's make sure we have the cameras on, because at the end of the day, we can talk at a management level as much as we like about partnerships and collaboration, but we need to be able to empower the people who are living that partnership day to day, if you like, on how to actually deliver that partnership. And so that's talking just about some of the interaction between the sponsor and the service provider. If we then talk about within the organizations themselves, what you want to try to avoid if you're a service provider is to have your sponsor think that your operations team and quality teams never talk to each other. And likewise, it's not helpful for a service provider to have the opinion that the same is true in the sponsor. Quality and operations don't talk to each other. So having a partnership and making sure there's a level of trust, a level of collaboration, and we use this word a lot when talking about this, a mindset of quality and interaction within the organization, which generally needs to be driven from the top. And so building the strong relationships between quality and operations to enable those interactions I talked about with the project managers, it really needs to come from the top of each organization. It's not just an edict. It's not just a, hey, everyone, quality is important. Let's make quality first. It's actually walking the walk and talking the talk and making sure that operations goals, quality goals are the same, that the company's goals are the same, and they incorporate quality as well.
Now, in your experience, what are the key factors that contribute to a successful, value-driven collaboration between technology providers and sponsors?
I'm going to hark back to something that I mentioned in the last question and talk about people. I'm going to assume for the purposes of this discussion that there are no issues with contracts, with budgets, etc., that the business side of things is handled adequately. And so the key factors that contribute really comes down to how are your individuals interacting with each other? Do they get on with each other? Do they have the opportunity to know whether they get on with each other? One thing I often say is that if you're working with a sponsor or the sponsor working with the service provider and you telephone or ping or whatever the terminology you want to use, your counterpart, and you see their name come up and you go, oh, now what do they want? That's not a great partnership. If it's, oh, great, Alison's calling, I wonder what she wants, we didn't have a scheduled call, that's a good partnership. It's really the conceptual relationship between the people. How do they view it? How willing are they to talk to each other? How willing are they to bring up potential issues, potential challenges, just for awareness? We talked at the very beginning of this interview about not having any surprises. Nobody likes surprises in the clinical trial world. So having the confidence in the relationship to be able to say, hey, just to let you know, this happened at a site. It may not be an issue, but I want you to know. Easy to follow up with a nothing happened, there wasn't a problem, rather than finding out there was a problem and then having to broach the fact that there was a serious incident, for example, when you hadn't given a heads up. That's just an example of something that you can mitigate happening if you do have those strong relationships between providers and sponsors. So, key factors was asked about, I think it all comes down to people and it all comes down to communication.
And to wrap up, what role does transparent communication play in building trust between technology providers and sponsors? And how does this ultimately benefit the clinical trial process?
Thank you for that question. Again, I think I touched on a little bit about transparent communication, but the way it plays in building trust is, again, no surprises in either direction. But the more information is available, the easier it is for every party to plan, every party to anticipate what the other party may need, much easier to anticipate how interactions may be required if there are challenges in the future. So the more transparent the communication is, the easier it is to run a clinical trial and therefore benefit the clinical trial process. We mustn't forget that at the end of the day, we're here because diseases exist, patients are there needing, waiting for drugs. The clinical trial process is the working through the development to ascertain, can we market this drug? Does this drug work? And all of this culminates in submission to a regulatory authority. And a regulatory inspection, in my view, is the culmination of the trust and the interaction between a sponsor and all of their vendors, including the technology partners. And you don't want to suddenly start creating trust and transparent collaboration just prior to that. You want to have built a very good baseline, if you like, of communication. So I think trust and transparent communication are two different things, but they require each other to thrive.
Well, thank you very much, Alison, for speaking with us today. We really appreciate your time and insights.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We look forward to learning more about Y-Prime's impact on collaborative quality operations partnerships in clinical trials. Thank you all for joining us for this Xtalks Spotlight feature. We hope you enjoyed the discussion.